names, titles, and pronouns, and then we will adjourn, hopefully all very quickly, or at least in due order for them. So at this point, for the Northampton Open Media, start our countdown.
Absolutely. Let's start it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, hi everybody, and thank you for joining. So we will call this meeting to order and do a roll call. So I'll start going alphabetically through the list of commission members. Lois Aherns.
It's Aaron.
Aaron, sorry.
All right, I'm here.
Elizabeth Barajas Roman is not here. Booker Bush.
Here.
Right. Daniel Kennedy, myself here. Nick Fleischer.
Here.
David Hoos.
Here.
Alex Jarrett.
Here.
Carmen Lopez.
Here.
Javier Luengo Garrido.
Here.
Dana Olivio.
Here.
Namdi Pole. Yeah. Okay.
Here. I'm here. Sorry. Here. Here.
Michael Quinlan.
Here.
Josie Rosales.
Here.
Cynthia Swopas.
Here.
And Larissa Rivera Gonzalez.
Here.
All right. So we have a quorum for this meeting. And so at this point, I would move to open the meeting to public comment. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
All right. So what we'll do, we're going to mirror the same thing that the council does for the city of Northampton. So we will ask that people use the raise hand feature on the participants list to raise their hand. If you're calling in, use *9 to raise your hand on the phone. If you're on your computer, if you click on participants in the Zoom interface on the bottom right-hand side, you'll be able to raise your hand. We will go in order of people who have raised their hand. We'll call on you. We'll have 3 minutes of time, and I have a timer going for that. At the end of the 3 minutes, we'll ask you to finish your sentence if you've not completed that. And we will go with public comment for an hour. So we'll begin, and the first person is Richard Hendrick.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Richard Hendrick, 30 Main Street in Northampton. I appreciate the opportunity to say hello. I think this is a really important part of the meeting. And I'm a clinical social worker. I've worked on the streets and shelters for many, many years. I consider myself sort of a fly on the wall for this process, and I hope I stay with it and just help you in any way I can to give you any insights I may have. Saturday, the New York Times article that caught my attention was how the pledge to dismantle the Minneapolis police collapsed. And this is a follow-up to what the city council in Minneapolis was doing. And the piece basically said, oh my goodness, this just doesn't look good. So it looks very negative. It was very positive to me because I admired the courage of the councilors who went forward. I also admire the fact that they've acknowledged that they made a lot of mistakes. And I think the good part about this, there's always good in things like this, is that now it's come to another city council forum, to the commission here. And I think that that is giving you an opportunity to learn some things. I'm sure you're going to be centering on what perhaps is called the mission statement, you know, those items that you're going to look at. The use of force policies, the recruitment and diversity policies, training and equipment, etc. And I think you're going to be looking at that as sort of the big daunting piece. And it seems daunting when I looked at it and said, this is a lot of material. I think you'll find some really nice things on the internet. I'm new to the internet, so I'm sure you're going to find much more than I have found. There's a massive good things there that are going to help you considerably. Philip Atty Goff from John Jay Criminal Justice, really a guy who knows a lot. A great article, The New Era of Public Safety and Advocacy Toolkit for Fair, Safe, and Effective Community Policing. The Kerner Commission, the STAR program in Denver, the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon, Camden, New Jersey. There are many good things that I think you're going to find, and it's going to help you with your report. I think your mission really is going to be, the hard task is going to be convincing the 500 some out people who are protesting in the streets, young, smart. I may sound patronizing, I'm 77, but really folks that are just the future and very powerful voices, but they're not a fan of this commission from what I've gathered. I think your task is going to be somehow to reach them, to reach the city council, to reach the mayor, and to reach the silent majority, many, many people, and to reach the police. So I see this as quite a task. It may seem like an impossible dream. As you dream, I was in the Peace Corps many years ago, and Don Quixote was our idol, tilting at windmills, the impossible dream. So keep dreaming. And I close with...
that's your time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Amy Martin.
Hi there. Took
There
me a
we
minute
go.
to get the tech going. Hi, I'm Amy Martin. I live at 17 Federal Street in Florence, and I thank you all on this commission for your service. No easy task in front of you. I'm the parent of a high school student in town and a member of the Northampton Education Foundation funded group, Race, Equity, Action, and Learning. Real supports these calls that you will be hearing for meaningful, decisive, and urgent action to redirect use of our tax dollars from the punitive, racist criminal justice system that policing supports to actual systems of community care, public safety, and restorative justice. In particular, with our focus on the school district, we know that while the school resource officer position was eliminated this year due to police funding cuts and a lack of students physically in school, and while the current school committee is committed to that position of no SRO, an SRO could be reinstated in the future. There have been many studies on the disproportionate harm on Black and Brown students by SROs nationwide. And while the police department here does not track SRO involvement with students by race, and while SROs are officially limited from involvement with school discipline, the SRO is part of the school culture that leads our district to have, in fact, the same disproportionate use of disciplinary measures on our Black and Brown students. Data from the school district shows that students of color account for over 30% of the total student population and over 50% of the students disciplined. And we know that this mirrors the rate of involvement of residents of color with police in the city at large. So we urge you to look at ways of supporting public safety in our city and school system that teach and utilize nonviolent conflict resolution methods and permanently eliminate the school resource officer role in our schools. Again, I appreciate and value the hard work and contributions that this commission is making to create a more just and truly safe city for everyone who lives here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on the list is Jesse Hassinger.
Thank you very much. My name is Jesse Hassinger, and I am in Ward 4. Thank you, Dan, Dana, and the Commission for allowing public comment today. It is very important to be able to hear what the Northampton community wants out of this commission. There are two salient points that I feel should be highlighted that this commission should investigate further and keep in mind during its time in studying all of this. The first being that the 10% cut of the police budget that happened this past fiscal, for this current fiscal budget, really does need to be spent towards forming community services that will replace police in emergency calls. These include mental issues, wellness checks, overdose calls, domestic issues, as well as a number of other response calls that should not involve deadly weapons being on the scene, as that frequently only heightens tension and reactive behaviors on both sides. And two, the allocation of those funds must be the first step toward a complete abolition of the Northampton Police Department. In its place, a group of well and specifically trained individuals will be able to more humanely answer any emergency call. There is no excuse for a cabal of officers who are trained to perceive every encounter as combative. That does not lead to a culture of safety. It leads to a continued culture of fear, intimidation, and terror at the hands of those who are supposed to be working and protecting every individual regardless of race, class, or health status. For the safety of Northampton, these are necessary steps so that we can actually become a model for nonviolent peacekeeping and support for our community. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. The next person is Tay Tay.
That's you.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Joel Ortega, and I'm helping Tay out. See, what I'm saying is, there's a lot of homeless people out here, and if we can see if we can help them out. There's a lot of people on the streets. You know, look at the weather today. You know, I can't say nothing negative about the police, but the real issue is that we have a lot of homeless people out there, and there's really not too many resources for them. You know, and a lot of them have addictions and they're alcoholics. And it's just, if there's any way that I try helping myself, and so does Tay. Like, we try feeding them on Fridays, and I try helping them out as much as I can. I'm only one person, you know, and there is a lot of homeless because I'm in a shelter myself, and it's hard, you know. There's really nothing out there to help them. It's hard, you know. I know what they're going through because I used to be an addict. The addiction really hurts right now. And I don't even know how we can even help them. I try to give them clothes, I try to do whatever, and I'm only one person. There is a lot of homeless out there, and they're a lot suffering. I just don't know. I try my best. I'm only one person. And so does Tay. We all try to help him out. Yeah, anything to say?
You said you need more service options.
And then, like I said, we need more service for them, like with their addiction. Because we do have service net out there, but they can only do so much. And CSO helps out because I work with CSO too.
Public bathroom.
Huh?
It's a public bathroom.
Yeah, and then there is no restrooms for them. They're doing things out on the middle of the
living in tents, and you know, it's not good. It's not good for the community because they're littering, they're doing everything, and we need more shelters because
we holds 13 people in Grove Street, and I think there's 8 in on Center Street, and there's more homeless people out there, and that's what's really damaging everything. It's not healthy. But we try.
All right, thank you for that comment. The next person is Jose Adastra.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for the time. I think that we should be paving the way for abolition here, and that as many, cop enthusiasts as there are, Online, I don't see many of them at our meetings. I think that that says a lot. And that if we're thinking ideally here, if we actually have hope for the future, everyone up here is smart enough to acknowledge that there's a huge problem in the way that American policing has damaged Black and Native and Latino communities. It's clear, and if you're denying it at this point, I don't know how, if you're educated. And so, with that being a very basic, understanding, I feel like paving the path for abolition, having that be our starting point, is actually the only option, because that's the only, what we need to do is undo all the damage that we've done. And I think that a way we could start doing that is like the previous speaker said, I've asked you nicely. We've asked. I've been rude. We've been, we wrote letters. We've written petitions. We've asked you in every way we know how, up to begging and up to praying, to collaborate with community organizers and to help us use this budget that got cut to house people. And, just as I, predicted, it's up until winter, and there's still no solution. And the problem is that they won't trust the police department. I've even talked to the cops. Okay. They might not want to come here and put their jobs on the line, but the cops actually have to do things that they shouldn't have to do. And they are also frustrated. They are repeatedly, I have 3 kids. Okay. I sent them to East Hampton schools, my 8-year-old's in East Hampton, and the rest of them are going over there too, because there's no cop over there. So you're losing money, okay, from people like me who refuse to put their children in a school with a cop, okay, because I won't do that. And many people who grew up as, a family that got so many of my family members arrested, we're not going to tolerate having a cop in the school. So you're actively losing money if you don't actually legally ban that requirement or need for an SRO. People are just going to go elsewhere, through school choice, and that's your loss as a city. Collaborating with the organizers, there's plenty of like GoFundMe's going on right now. It would be really humane to divert some of the money that we have to that. And something immediate that should happen is the positions at NETA, where the cops are. That's insulting. That's a big salary going to someone. Some people in town without homes, they can and want to work. That is an easy job. Redivert the jobs to the homeless people or to ex-incarcerated people so they can build a life instead of the police. Thank you.
All right. Next is Sean Donovan.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So I'm grateful what Jose and other folks have said before me, and thank you all for your time. Tonight I comment as a resident of Ward 3. I live at 59 Coolidge Avenue, but I'm also on the leadership with the Western Mass Recovery Learning Community. It's a local peer-led support and advocacy organization. I'm going to speak to some of those experiences. So I've facilitated a weekly Alternatives to Suicide peer support group in Northampton since April of 2012. And I've met hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are many things among them, but who all share the experience of thinking about suicide. So I've learned from countless stories and from my own that feeling suicidal often comes from feeling powerless and experiencing trauma. I've heard many people in these groups share that they've had emergency services, including the police, called on them by family, by mental health clinicians, and by others in their lives because they express these feelings. Sometimes this is what's called a wellness check, quote unquote. But I can tell you from many accounts where distress is met with uniforms and guns that this action does not build up someone's wellness at all. Also, accounts in popular media recently have shown that these so-called wellness checks impact poor folks, Black folks, and people of color more severely, whose lives are often more policed by social service agencies with more direct routes to the police. So I worry about police interrogating people in wellness checks and also in public space in Northampton also following these trends. So I wanted to offer the commission this like slice of what I hope can be moving towards abolition, in the sense that assessing how policing operates in our city. It's important to look at how social service agencies are intertwined with these forces of the police too. So although each of these agencies has great people who work for them, ServiceNet, clinical and support options, and the Department of Mental Health, rely on police power to enforce their authority on people they serve. And through Section 35 and Section 12, look it up if you're not sure what those words mean. I know that the situations these agencies confront through their work often have no easy answers. Some people have named some of those already tonight. But I can assure you that the reliance on police and power over strategies of addressing pain and conflict only multiply these things. I urge the commission to include ways police are woven into things like the so-called mental health system and social services in its investigations. The United Nations has been very clear in recent years that addressing mental health issues in the world is less about chemical imbalances than it is about power imbalances. And while our country's leaders do not heed the words of the UN, I'm well aware of that, I encourage us to be more wise and think about how to move towards defunding our police force and investing in community supports, accessible housing, peer mediators and advocates, and other resources that would aid in our community's well-being. So thank you for your time, and thanks for everyone else sharing from their own experience too.
All right, thank you. The next person is Emily Coffin.
Hi, thank you all so much for your service on this commission. It means a lot that people are taking so much out of their time, of their lives. So when hundreds of members of this community came to city council meetings in June to support significant and meaningful defunding police and reinvesting in the community, this commission was pitched to the community by city leaders as the solution to police violence in Northampton. This commission should provide the city with a roadmap to defunding the police and reinvesting in communities, because that is what city leaders were asking for in June and why they claimed they could not make deeper cuts to the police budget. Mayor Narkowitz said he would not reallocate the funds if our city democratically made the cut that the world was calling them to do. And so far, he is making true to that promise to not reallocate. He has not reallocated any amount of the $700,000, to my knowledge, of the cut that was made. Without your help, I believe that the mayor and Chief Casper will try to reclaim the funding that the community has attempted to redirect for ourselves. We need you to help the city reallocate these funds, we need you to help the city reallocate these funds. We don't need to look about how to improve policing with review boards and body cameras, because improving policing means improving a system of violence and brutality. Activists have spent decades making clear that mass incarceration and police brutality are significant problems, and it is time we start researching solutions, not problems. Solutions do not include body cameras or disciplinary review boards. They include significant reduction in police budget and an increase in funding in community services. And these community services that are funded need to be led by community members most impacted by police, including Black folks and unhoused folks, not traditional mental health services that perpetuate violence in our community. All of this takes significant work that the city leaders have said they cannot do alone. And I believe it is imperative that the commission take on this work, because it is complicated, and that right now we need to continue to build power in the community to be able to do these things. Please look at alternatives to police and advise the city the right way, rather than trying to reform the police system, which is not possible. Help us get to Northampton beyond policing and outline a plan for defunding police and reinvesting in the community through looking to alternatives to police like STAR programs and undoing the carceral system here at home. That is where we should be focusing our effort of this commission. Anything else may lead us to more inaction to our violent system of jails and police. This is where we could actually do something here at home.
All right, thank you. The next is a phone number here. Sorry, 1 second. And so just need to check one thing to confirm that I believe this is someone who was having issues before. Okay, yes. So this is someone who's contacted the council before. and wishes to make a statement, but they are unable to unmute themselves. So they've worked with Northampton Public Media, Northampton Open Media, and Councillor Nash to record a statement that they asked that we play for them. So I will be playing that statement.
This is Hildegard Friedman from Northampton, and I'm about to give to you music that is part of the last battle of the jazz era that I am inviting the people in the Mayor's Council to participate in for an undertaking which is action. It is the last battle of the jazz era for people that imagine that Mayor Walker and FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the Depression were participants in that. And of course, the jazz was not the jazz individuals were not the makers of that battle. This is quite different, but this is the last battle. And you're going to be paid not by me, by yourselves. You're going to be paid for your participation, your performance. It's a drive-in theater type event. We're going to get land all over the place, not only Northampton, it's tri-state. I'm going to be paid. It's not goodwill. It can't be goodwill. We have been through too much to call this a charity. It is Birdland 2. And this is Hildegard Friedman. Please call me. Please, I beseech you. 413-582-7081. It's a Florence Exchange, but I'm living in Northampton. 413-582-7081. This may turn into something as great or greater than Tanglewood. I have come here naked of fear. I have come here to love you, my share. I have come here with memories of love, and we will do great music with blue sky.
And I have to cut it off there because that is the 3-minute mark for that media. The next person is Alyssa Klein.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. That is a hard act to follow. My name is Elisa Klein. I live in Leeds, and I'm very grateful to you for your service to our community. I know how much of your precious time you'll spend doing this work for us and with us. Thank you for allowing for this crucial period of public comment at your very first working meeting. I do understand the concern that keeping meetings to a reasonable amount of time makes them more accessible to parents, people who work full-time, and others who can't stay on Zoom meetings for hours and hours. I absolutely get that, but in this case, in launching a process like the one you're about to embark upon, it's essential that you hear from the community. Community input is what should shape your work. Your accountability is to all of your neighbors in Northampton, not just the mayor and not just the city council. So thank you so much for listening to us and responding to our requests as you pursue this important piece of work. Angela Davis said about policing, we need to get off of the treadmill of reform. Please listen to members of this community as we call for you not to just conduct a review, not just make recommendations for police reform, and not re-legitimize policing. Rather, we call upon you to gather the evidence of why and how it is time to reduce the police budget next year, the year after, and the year after that, and reallocate the funding to the ways our community can truly be safe until we no longer spend our precious community and taxpayer dollars on an institution that was founded to catch and police enslaved Black people and that continues to enforce modern day systems that bind and harm Black people, Indigenous people, other people of color, gender nonconforming people, poor people, and others from subjugated and oppressed communities in our city. I believe that we as a community need to be creative and inventive in imagining a future without policing, legal, and carceral systems that harm as much as or more than they solve problems. We need to invest in preventative, transformative, justice-based structures, systems, and methods to keep our communities safe. As such, I'm asking you to scrutinize the city's police budget and every single thing they are paid to do and every single piece of equipment that they use to do it. I'm hoping you can create clear screens and analytics to assess and determine what we need and don't need in this community for safety and well-being. What we want and don't want in this community, what is ethical and what is unethical in keeping our community safe, and how to eliminate practices and activities and actions that are rooted in racial, class, and gender bias, or that have potential to be. Your recommendations need to be both values-based and guided by metrics. Does each and every activity you examine have a true community safety purpose? Are each of these activities carried out without the potential for discrimination towards or harm of particular members of our community based on what they look like, their mental health status, their gender, where they live, if they are unhoused, or if they don't have access to certain ways of keeping themselves clean? Are lethal weapons actually needed for any community safety activities and actions?
Sorry, that was your time.
Okay.
Do you want to finish your last sentence?
Let's see. I have 2 more paragraphs, so I think I'll just have to leave it at that, but thank you. I appreciate that very much.
All right. The next person is Rachel Maori.
Why does it always go faster when I read it to myself?
Well, this is perfect because that's a former Ward 7 City Councilor, and I'm Rachel Maori, Chesterfield Road in Leeds, and the Ward 7 current City Councilor. First, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking on this formidable task. I'm excited to have this process driven by incredibly well-equipped community members like you. And I understand that part of the process will be reviewing research on the impact and efficacy of our current law enforcement system. It is my hope, though, that the Commission will spend the bulk of its valuable energy focusing on designing alternatives to policing that are tailored and viable for our community, rather than spending the majority of your time trying to reform a law enforcement system that has inherent flaws. I would actually encourage you to focus on the reimagining process of what a community-led public system, safety system that works for all could look like here in Northampton. As a city councilor who will be one of those making inevitably tough decisions around the city's budget next year, I would deeply appreciate this commission's practical guidance on this by providing to us specific actionable goals that include budgetary recommendations and around reductions and reallocations of funds. Thank you so much, and I'm out here rooting for you.
All right, thank you. The next person up is Elliot Oberholzer.
Hi, can you hear me? Awesome. So first of all, thank you so much, all of you, for being on this commission. I am really excited for the work that you're going to do. Those of you that I know and that I've worked with in the past, I trust you so much to engage in this work. I really do. I echo what a lot of other people have said, that the content of whatever the product you put out is really important. It's important that it paves the way for abolition. It's important that it takes us towards a future without policing, because that is the ethical way to proceed. That is the way to build us towards a future where we are all safe and we're all more liberated. What I want to talk about specifically, though, is not so much about the content of what you produce, but about the way that you communicate what you produce. And in this, I am bringing my background as an evaluation consultant, which was my former career. So one thing that I learned when I was doing evaluation consulting is that you can make the most beautiful report in the world. And I hope you do. I hope you make us the most beautiful, powerful roadmap away from policing that exists. But if you have the most beautiful report in the world and then you just give it to people, it doesn't mean anything. They're not going to use it properly. So what I want to talk to you about is putting together learning process that gets people to then commit to specific actions and changes as a result of that learning. Now that can look like conversations, that can look like meetings with people who are in positions to make the changes that you want them to make. But whatever your timelines, whatever your process is, you need to build in significant collaborative learning opportunities at the end, because just delivering a report or recommendations isn't going to make those things happen. For some of you, I know I'm telling you stuff you know already, but just in case this is news to anybody,
Hey, babe.
I trust you so much to come up. Whoa, hello? I trust you so much to come up with good recommendations, and I want you to use the process that will make those recommendations actually happen. Again, thank you so much for your service on this commission, and I'm really.
All right, thank you. And then the last person is Ashwin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashwin Ravi Kumar. I am a resident of Amherst and an assistant professor of environmental studies at Amherst College. And I also serve on the Energy and Climate Action Committee in Amherst. So I know a little bit about how volunteer civilian committees can work. So thank you all so much for agreeing to put work into this commission. As someone that spends a lot of time in Northampton and as a brown person, I'm really excited to have someone that I can call that isn't the police to help me feel safe when I am in town. And I just really want to emphasize that we have a huge opportunity here to invest $700,000 or so in real alternatives to policing. This is something that not a lot of other municipalities have. I view this commission as ratifying, by way of its existence, the rigorous and data-driven consensus that police don't make us safer, that they uphold white supremacy, and reproduce racialized violence and bias, and also that there are better ways forward. So I really hope that you all feel empowered to take the head start that we've been granted and not spin our wheels re-excavating known facts about the problems of policing. Instead, we should start right away looking deeply within our community, taking stock of the many assets, skills, and passions that we have, whether it's mental health services expertise, physical health services, EMT skills, that kind of thing, to start investing in building those alternatives. The good news is that there are really wonderful and inspiring models all over the country where people have started to do this work. I'm not going to catalog them here. I'm not an expert on them, but I hope that you will also look further afield to find examples and try to be a space where we can start to imagine what those alternatives look like and make sure that this tremendous opportunity that we have in the form of $700,000 or so, which is obviously not nearly enough to truly replace repressive systems of policing and incarceration that we face here, but to make those resources really go to work for us, building on the skills and positive assets that we have. Thank you all so much, and I really look forward to seeing how this commission's work unfolds in the future.
All right, thank you. The next person up is Yaping Douglas.
Hi, my name's Yao Ping. I live in Turners Falls, but I am in Northampton quite a bit and have grown up in the area. And I just wanted to second what other people have said about hoping that this commission can be a place for recommendations and a very concrete plan to come out for how Northampton can actually divest from policing and invest resources into actual alternatives to police. I think that the description that was put out about the commission by the mayor and city council included a lot of items about like looking into body cameras and other things that have already been investigated quite a bit in the last 10 years along lines of policing reforms. And I think there are so many of us in the community that don't feel like we need to study these reforms and we don't actually need any more detailed information about how the Northampton Police Department works. We just want to know how Northampton can move away from policing into all the alternatives that really keep people safe. And so I hope that you as the commission can feel empowered to come up with your own goals and priorities based on where you think Northampton needs to go instead of feeling beholden to the description that was put out by the mayor and city council previously. Thank you all so much for what you're doing. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Oops, sorry. Kala Garrido.
Hi, my name is Kala. I'm 16. I live in Haydenville, but I spend a lot of time in Northampton and have worked in Northampton. And I just want to reiterate what has already been said surrounding the fact that I hope this commission spends their time trying to create a roadmap to ultimately wean the city off of police entirely and redirect that funding towards community-based alternatives for safety and care. We already know that policing is harmful and reform measures don't work, and we need your final report to be a blueprint for ultimately getting rid of police and investing city money in alternatives. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So the next person is Haven.
Hi, I'm Haven. I'm 16 and I live in Deerfield, but I spend a lot of time in Northampton. And yeah, I just wanted to come and reiterate some of the points that have been made and make it clear that as many of these logos on people's Zoom say, we really want you all to be creating a path to abolition of the police instead of focusing on reforming the police. I also wanted to point out something that Emily said a while ago, which was focusing on helping advise the mayor on the reallocation of the 10% cut for your first December report, if that's possible. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And then Sasha.
Hi, my name's Sasha. I just wanted to speak really quickly about the point that the previous person just brought up about the money that was reduced from the police budget for fiscal year 21. And there's a number that gets tossed around a lot, and that's 700,000. That's the second amount that was reduced. So I just want to remind everyone that the original budget in May budgeted $6,900,000, and the ultimate budget in June was $6 million flat. The exact difference is $882,602. And I just want to bring that up for two reasons. One, I just want to make sure that the mayor stays accountable for that money, and that 180 doesn't just disappear. And also, I just want to remind everyone that that money was reduced from the police budget not to punish the police, but to fund alternatives to the police. So what I would urge the commission to do before you get super deep into all your recommendations and reports is get a commitment from the mayor that those monies will be allocated for that purpose. Because you can spend a lot of time writing up a report and then it doesn't get funded because there's no commitment for that money to go there. And then it feels like kind of a waste of time. That's it. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sasha. And then the next person is 19P1394 impounded case.
Hi, sorry, it's Dana Goldblatt. I had that from when I used Zoom for an appeal. That was the case number. I didn't change it back yet. I just realized it after I was in. I just wanted to reiterate some of the things I've heard other people saying, that this needs to be something that really directs the mayor toward abolishing the police. The baseline fact of having an armed paramilitary of really authoritarian people. Hold on just a second. No. An armed paramilitary of really authoritarian people in Northampton who have authority to use violence against people who are mentally ill or just Black and walking through town is really disturbing. There's absolutely no reason we should have it. And the whole point of this, of all the activism that people were doing and all the people who showed up to city council, was to ask for that to end. And they didn't ask for it to be reformed or for there to be some kind of citizen commission or any of the other things that I feel like some of the city council members were pretending to hear. They were asking for, and we were asking for, abolition. And there are steps that need to be taken before you abolish the police, because the police have usurped a number of civil functions in our society. They do a lot of things right now that shouldn't be police functions, but they need to get done. So we need to move those functions out of the police, and we need to continue to make sure they get done. There's a lot of planning that needs to go into that. And I really hope this isn't just going to be writing a report on how to have a citizen review commission about whether the police are sensitive. Like that's not what's going on. No one's asking for politically correct police. We're asking for less police. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So at this point, it looks like that's the last of the calls for public comment. Even though we scheduled out 10 more minutes, I don't think we need to belabor. Oh, one more person. Okay. So Ruby.
Hi, I also really just want to reiterate the main goal is to pave the way for abolition. The Commission's time should be spent on creating a roadmap for ultimately weaning the city off of police entirely and redirecting city resources to create community-based alternatives for safety and care. We already know that policing is harmful and reform measures, like body cams, don't work. We need their final report to be a blueprint for ultimately getting rid of the police and actively investing city money in alternatives. Thanks.
Okay. Maybe that's the last comment. All right, so I don't see anything popping up at this point. So I think we can move on to the other big meaty issue of why we're here, which is our charge and work plan formulation. At this point, does anyone want to open with any like thoughts, feelings, or strong emotions that they have? And I'm actually going to let's see. All right, so I'm going to unmute for Nandi.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to say to the public that spoke that I found it very helpful to hear the public comment. I thank my colleagues on the commission for voting to hear the public comment. When we decided that last time, I was on the fence. I thought hearing one way or the other, I wasn't exactly clear what the benefit was, but I just voted in favor of it. And I think this was a helpful, clear, sort of coherent message from at least a segment of the population. Just wanted, but specifically, my comment is really to those who spoke tonight, to thank them for their input, and as a member of the commission, to say that at least I heard you, and will have and be influenced by the things that were said. My comment.
And then Josie.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo the whole we're listening to the community. I want to thank all of you for coming out here today and saying your piece. I especially want to thank the young members of our community for engaging in kind of civic action. It's tough, and it really warms my heart to see the youth kind of get involved. And ultimately, my hope for this commission is that, you know, we do pave that way, and because ultimately it is your generation that is going to inherit the system. So I definitely want to say that I hear you for sure. That's it.
Okay. Lois.
I too want to thank people for their comments, and I'm really glad that we had this public comment period before beginning. So for everybody that wanted to see that happen, I thank them. When we get into the actual agenda part of this, I don't know if we're about to start that now. I would like to, before we have the discussion of the commission charge, if we could have a brief, hopefully, discussion about the use of names and titles and all of that before we start calling on people.
Yeah, we can do that. That was actually scheduled for the second discussion item, but we could move that up if somebody wants to make that motion.
No, I do.
Awesome. Does anyone want to second that?
I second that motion.
All right. So I saw Josie's hand, and then Alex, I think I see you raising your physical hand. Are you seconding, or did you want to talk after Josie? I guess that's sort of silly. I should. All right, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry, Javier, not Josie.
I just want to reiterate what Lois, Jose has been saying. It is important for people to come here to keep talking. What I would say to people is that please keep coming, keep showing up, keeps reminding us about this, because for what I was able to see in my line of work, memory is extremely fragile. And you guys are the ones reminding us what this is about. So I'm thankful to you. I'm thankful for your comments. And I'm thankful also to those who spoke that are bringing their life expertise and their professional expertise to us.
And then Alex.
Thank you. I believe it's the discretion of the chair to move an item to come earlier. So unless anyone wants to correct me on that, I believe that you could decide to move that item first.
Okay. Well, I mean, we do have co-chairs, but since Dana seconded that, I'll assume that she's all for it, and I'm fine with that as well. So, collective push to move that up. So
I think Lois has their hand up again.
Lois, you should be good.
Okay, the reason I was going to bring this up, and then I saw it on the agenda last week, there was a lot of, every time a roll was called, there were people who had sort of their honorifics, you know, counselor this and attorney that and whatever, you know, doctor. And I would hope that what we could do is not do that. I would hope that we could all just be called by our first names and not our titles. Some of us have titles and some of us don't. I don't have any official title. I mean, I could make one up, but I don't have one. And I would hope that we could just go for something egalitarian. And so that's my proposal. First names, no honorifics and titles.
Are there other folks that would like to make a comment around that? Sorry, Josie, and then Alex.
I just want to second that. I agree. I think, yeah, I just want to second it. That's it.
Okay. Harmon. Sorry, I lost the ability to unmute you for a second. There we go.
I agree. Thank you for bringing it up. I did think about that last week. It just makes we're not all in this, we don't all have the same background, which is, it's a great thing and that's perfectly fine. But I think for this forum, I really do, I would appreciate just using the first names. I can't remember, I don't know everyone here, so I can't remember what pronouns you prefer. It's not listed under the names. I don't know if, I don't want to call you something that you're not okay with. So I definitely agree with you, Louis. I think it just makes it so much understandable and welcoming also if I can just call and be called by my first name. So yeah, I agree with you 100%.
All right, and then I know it's out of order, but Alex, I saw you raise your hand physically.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so I'm absolutely in favor of first names. And would you, just a question, should we always be using the raise hand feature or just physically raising the hand? What do the chairs prefer?
I would prefer the feature only because there's so many people, it's hard to see everyone's.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
And it also gives me a nice clear list so I can see what order it should be in rather than if I noticed a movement or not.
Yeah.
So I would prefer that as well.
Great.
And then Michael.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone is saying here. I think first names is completely appropriate. My only pause with that would be that I speak for myself only, and I also know there's another counselor here, and that's how we were both addressed all of last week. So I'm very comfortable with it, but I would, you know, and it seems like the group is moving in this direction. So I just wanted to say that I support the idea. Thank you.
And then Namdi.
As someone who was, my honorific was used last week, it's totally fine with me to use my first name if you can pronounce it, which is Namdi. Chair has shown great skill in being able to do that and earning his chair position. So yes, anyone can use my first name if you can say it. Otherwise you can say, hey you, or Mr. Cole, or whatever works, but yeah, no honorifics needed.
So, I mean, I think as a general rule, we probably don't need to vote on that. This is just going to be setting up the norms of our convention. So if everyone's comfortable with that, we'll just use folks' first names as you put them into Zoom, so that if there's another name that you would like everyone to use, you can do that. If you'd like to, I'd also invite people to put in their pronouns if they feel comfortable or want folks to use a specific set of pronouns. And you're comfortable in this context sharing that, then please do. And I would invite everyone to do it, and I will change it myself in here to sort of normalize that process too. Which leads us to the next discussion, which is the charge and work plan formulation. So I'm assuming folks have all read the chart, or sorry, the issues that will be studied, along with the other parts of the commission. But we do have a lot that we could study, and there's a bunch on that list that people have asked us to study now outside of that list. So at this point, we should really look at how we want to structure ourselves moving forward, and maybe even talk about adopting consensus models and structural formations that will enable us to decide what we're doing and how we do it. So so Lois is the first person with their hand up.
Yes. I actually wanted to bring up a couple of things that have to do with the commission before we get in. I mean, they're related to the work, how we're going to do our work, but these are the things that came to mind. I don't know whether other people have been thinking about them, but these are the things that I thought of. The first thing I thought of is that I was wondering, I was talking to someone about a Google feature where there's a Google program that's a translation program. And then there can be somebody simultaneously translating, so that for people who are Spanish speakers, they can tune into the Google app, that app or program, whatever it's called, and then simultaneously hear what's going on in Spanish. And I investigated a little bit. I think the software costs $1,000, and the whole city could use it, not just this commission. So it's $1,000 a year, I think, and the city could use it for everything. But then a person who's the translator would actually have to be paid whatever the cost is per hour to do the translation. So I would love to see something like this to make this more accessible, not just when we come to the hearings, but to the meetings itself. And so I put that out as an idea. The other thing that's also a money thing and an idea thing is, I know we had the city attorney last week explain open meetings and all that, but I wondered if we also should just put like some kind of marker or something that maybe we want an independent counsel for questions that will come up, legal questions where we don't want the city attorney being that counsel. And so I just wanted to bring that up as another idea, and also another budgetary issue. I mean, we talked about money last week about the staff person, and Mayor said that there was more money in the budget other than just the staff person's salary. So those are two things. The third thing I wanted to bring up, and I know we talked about meeting every 2 weeks, and I know this is going to be a much big conversation, but I just want to put it out there. I think in a way, if we could meet every week, we might be able to still have a public comment period and also have more time for discussion, and not try to jam everything into whatever it would turn out to be. So I just want to float that as another idea, even though we talked about meeting every 2 weeks. I just thought, based on last week where we were supposed to meet for 2 hours, we met for 3 hours. So those are the three kind of issues I hope that we can discuss before we get into the actual substantive work plan.
Okay. So that's 3 different asks there. So I'm keeping a list as we're going on. So Javier.
I would like to second what Lois is saying, and also I would like to add, I was thinking about this last week, that any kind of material that the commission releases or any kind of information that is on the Northampton City website related to the commission should be in Spanish or different languages, if we're going to be talking about accessibility.
Dana can't raise their hands or can't raise her hand because she's a co-host, but she's messaged me to let me know that she's raising her hand.
I raised my hand. I wanted to, I guess, going off of Lois's and Javier's comment around the accessibility, I'm wondering if we need to also make our meetings with closed caption for folks who can't see it. And I think that also creates a transcript that might be able to be translated into various languages. So something for us to think about and look into. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we have a couple more things to add to that list in terms of basic running for the meeting. Are there other questions or other comments that people want to make to get the ball rolling? Right. Oop. Nandi.
Hi, sorry, I'm new to this kind of meeting process, but I'm concerned about the agenda getting kind of hijacked and changed in the middle of a meeting. And I wonder if one thing we could maybe agree about is when items like this sort of come up, that they get added to a list, but maybe becomes the list for the subsequent meeting, or raised after we've gotten to the agenda items on this meeting. Because it seems to me like we're now have an item that was left over from last time. And if we just get into the habit of always being able to add things in line ahead, we might, derail the process. I just as a general thought, deciding how much we need to adhere to the agenda as set, shuffling it around items is one thing, but actually adding whole new items ahead of what we said we were going to do today, questionable practice for me.
And then Carmen.
I was thinking about what Louis had mentioned. Louise had mentioned about possibly meeting every Tuesday, and I did think about that as well. I thought maybe if we don't finish the agenda, for example, if we don't finish what we want to get through today, then we could possibly meet next Tuesday. But I do want to have some sort of space and time to be able to process. So I don't know if that could be an option, if it's at the end of today's meeting that we would decide if we went through all the objectives on the agenda. And if we didn't, then we can possibly then take a vote and decide if we're going to meet next week.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be part of the work plan system, like getting that set up and figuring out how we're going to decide when we meet. So yeah, I think that would be a sort of a natural part of this discussion. And then Alex.
I just wanted to, on the topic of how often we're meeting, and I think this is in relation to our work plan, the idea of subcommittees to explore various issues. So we could express interest in the topics that are in the scope of our work and any additional that we want to add. And then either individually or in subcommittees that are posted meetings, we can research, do the research. And so that's one thought, to have meetings kind of in between our full meetings to work in smaller groups or individually. Thanks.
All right, David.
Alex pretty much read my mind. Every board I've been on, especially one that's as large as this, it'd be very difficult to get work done in a 15-person meeting. I think we're going to have subcommittees, and my concern about once a week full commission meetings is we're not going to leave time enough for subcommittee meetings. That's all.
All right, and Lois.
I just want to respond to Nandi. I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, I think part of my bringing it up the way it is that I wasn't even sure how it is that an idea from a commissioner gets added to an agenda item, which I still don't know. But but I agree with you that I didn't mean to derail this at all. It's just things that I thought were important for us to set before we go on. And if I had figured out how to communicate to have it on an agenda, I would have done it that way. So I appreciate what you're saying. And I think going forward, when at least I know how to do that, I won't do it in that way. So thank you.
Just because I can't raise my own hand, I'm just going to jump in. Like, at least for myself, I don't necessarily see that as like derailing the conversation. I think it's actually adding to it, because if we're saying we want to start like how we work and how we function, how like having accessible features to what we do, like that's going to impact how we meet and how often and what resources we need to meet. So I sort of see those things as interrelated, as sort of undergirding and then becoming part of every process that we create. So at least for me, I think it's helpful to have those things sort of like the undergirding of all of what we do. At least that's for myself. And then Michael.
Well, I think I think, Dan, what you've just said is pretty accurate here. I mean, when we talk about the charge and work plan, what we're doing and how we're doing it is supported by how accessible we make the meetings and you know, some of the other ideas that have been floated here. But I think to Namdi's point, and Councillor Jer, Alex, you know, maybe you can just let me know if I'm false in this, but if we set an agenda and it's publicized, those are the items that we would deliberate. I think there's a reason for that the agenda has to be presented 48 hours in advance, and that is so that the public is aware of what we're going to deliberate. So I just think, you know, while I agree with what we're talking about tonight as part of our charge and work plan and part of how we're going to go about this work, I do think that sticking to the agenda is also somewhat important in terms of us making sure that we're true to the public that we're working for.
Javier?
Yeah, two things. I agree with what you, Dan and Michael have said about Lois intervention. I think it's talking about how you are going to make accessible your own work and your workflow to others. I feel is part of it. I also would like to, you know, if I don't like to be absolutist. So if we ended up deciding for subcommittees, right? If as a whole body we decide on it, we need to be careful from this point of view that if we're voting in favor of it, thinking that this is going to move the conversation faster, that's not necessarily going to happen because we still are under open meeting law. So we need to be cognizant of it, and if we're gonna take that route, to have enough discussion to understand the pro and cons of it.
So Alex and then Nandi.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Lois's question. In order to get something on the agenda, you would submit it to the chairs, and then they would choose up to put it on the agenda and when. And then regarding open meeting law, that subcommittees can be posted. In fact, they have to be posted open meetings. So they would go on the city calendar and be posted at least 2 business days in advance. And anyone could attend from the public to view those as well. Individual work, of course, does not have to be posted. Thanks.
All right, and then Nandi.
Thank Alex for his helpful clarification, and Lois for yours as well. And I would just maybe wonder or ask if somebody has a thought about something to be added to the agenda, whether it would be permissible to sort of raise it orally like Lois did, but that the chair would say, you know, in a sense, it gets in line behind what's on the agenda currently. And if we decide we're going to move it from sort of its place in line, which would be at the end of the line, we could vote on that. We could say, or as we heard earlier, the chair has the prerogative to say, or the co-chairs could make the decision that this is such an important item, we should probably put it ahead. But what I'm looking for is orders that we don't, because everybody can make valid points that at any given moment might be, you know, quite compelling, and ourselves chasing those points, sort of off track. I just want to give accountability to the agenda that we commit to, so we do make progress. While I do also agree that the things we've chosen to prioritize make sense to me to prioritize. So that's the thing I'll have to say about that.
Yeah. Booker, and then I'm going to respond as well. Booker, you're still muted. Do you see a pop-up that says unmute? Oh, it pops up for a second. Let's try that again. There we go.
So what I said before is that in the Human Rights Commission, the last part of the agenda is new business. So if there are issues that need to be raised, they are raised at the end of the agenda. That is, I think it's actually always better if agenda items can be placed prior to a meeting, but that requires some forethought. So in this, I think what's hard about this sort of situation is I agree that I think what Lois is bringing up is how will we do process? So it is actually part of how we're going to do our format meeting. But I think I also agree that what we should do is if there are new issues brought, it should be part of new business as a last form of the agenda.
Yeah, and I'll sort of put this for myself. I mean, when we're talking about this, I think we are doing what's on the agenda right now, which is discussing our charge and our work plan. Like that to me, and I guess this is subjective, but I think understanding that we need to have a process in place to make sure that our meetings are accessible, that the content that we create is accessible both in language and in terms of digital accessibility, that if, like I've been taking notes, so we have what is the process? Are we going to have subcommittees? If so, what is the process for forming them? What's the process for getting reports back? What is the frequency of meetings? All of those things I think are part of the work plan. I'm not sure if we want to discuss, like I open the floor to this. I don't know if folks want to focus on what the actual work plan is before we accept a full charge, or if we want to do those things in tandem, or if we want to do all of the work on the charge first. And go from there. But at this point, I think we've got a pretty good undergirding of what we want. But I think this is all related. I wouldn't personally see these as new business in this case. But I would agree if there was something brand new. So maybe like the idea of like how do we purchase or make requests as a body to the city for funds, that might be different, or like whether or not we have an independent counselor. There, I would say that would probably be new business to go at the end. And then Alex. Ooh. Let's try that again. There we go.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point, and perhaps the city solicitor could, if we need that, could clarify this. But we can only discuss the items that are on the agenda, and you make an excellent point, Dan, that there's the most of what we're talking about is within the within that item on the agenda, and items in new business we can only discuss to a certain extent. I'm not exactly sure to the. We can certainly discuss what we propose to be added to future agendas.
Alex, I think you've lost your input. Or can anyone else hear Alex? No? All right. Alex, whatever you were saying there, I think it got cut. Like maybe your mic is disconnected? I'm not sure if you want to troubleshoot this in the There you go. Alex, did you have something, or did you want to finish your thought? You got cut out. No? Okay. I guess we'll jump to Larissa.
Yeah, I just wanted to second the idea of subcommittees. I think that would be helpful to keep the progress moving forward, and also for us to build relationships with each other, because the work that we have to do, I think some of it, like I said before, needs to happen with the way we work with each other. And then I also like the idea of having weekly meetings, but I don't know if people thought if we picked some sort of subcommittee, if we made subcommittees, if we had like sort of back and forth meetings. So we have one full meeting and then subcommittee meeting the next week and just kind of go back and forth. So you could keep the work moving forward, but we're not always this many people deep to try to do a lot in one session.
Okay, so we have Alex back, maybe. Alex, can you hear us? Okay. So we'll sort of troubleshoot and get that set on the side. Meanwhile, at this point, oh, Alex is back. You should be unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me now? I think Zoom crashed on my
computer.
I'm not sure what you heard of that, but I'll just briefly say we have to, under open meeting law, we can only discuss the items that are posted on the agenda. And there's certainly, we can use our judgment as far as that this is a broad scope of what we're discussing now. And the new business can be used to discuss items that will be discussed at a future agenda. And perhaps we may want to ask for clarification from the city solicitor about what the lines are there. But that's my understanding, that we do have to stick to so that the public is informed of what we'll be talking about.
All right. So to that end, and staying on topic, does anyone have any other comments or questions or concerns that they want to put forward about the work plan that we haven't heard yet? Do we want to discuss the charge that we have from the city? So I guess I'll do the standard check-in. Has everyone seen the issues to be studied by the committee, or sorry, by the commission? Okay, so seeing heads shaking, so we'll just go through and list them out. But the issues that we need to, or that we can look at, but we are not limited to. Oh, sorry, Carmen, go ahead. You should be able to unmute. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I am buried with emails, so I know that the email is in somewhere land, but if that can be re-emailed, I read it when I first received it, but I haven't read it since. And I would love to, I'm a visual person, so I definitely have to have it in front of me. If that can be emailed.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also on the Northampton Police Commission website as well. So I guess, give me a second here. So we also, Dana has to step out for another meeting as well. So she'll be leaving us at the moment. What I can do, just so that everyone has it, I will bring it up as a screen so that we can all see it. But just so everyone can see this, that the issues that we are asked to be studied, or that are part of this are the department size, structure and services and budget, the use of force, the citizen complaint processes, recruitment and diversity policies, training and equipment, data collection and reporting transparency, body-worn cameras, union contracts, civilian oversight and review models, transitioning 911 calls for mental health, houselessness, substance abuse disorder, and other non-criminal services and domestic violence calls to civilian responders and social service agencies, a study of resources for governmental and non-governmental investment in needs that, if met, reduce crime, and an examination of alternatives to current policing policies and practices. So there's a pretty big list there, and as you noted already, there's a number of things that people brought up in public comment that are not on that list. So reallocations, paths for abolition, and things of that nature that we could also consider as well. Cynthia?
Yeah, I was wondering, looking at the work plan and also some of the very interesting comments, if we have access to things like the police budget, which I'm going to assume is online, but you know, the real detail behind it, and also police protocol. I keep hearing in the media, well, this was our protocol. Now going down that path is challenging protocol, and I know that for the respect out of the folks that spoke at public comment, that we're not restructuring the police department. But I just wonder how we would get information, how we would get data. Someone mentioned metrics, how we can find the number of complaints against the police department. You know, think data like that we can work from. Is that available to us?
Yeah, so, sorry, I saw someone had their hand up for a second. I don't want to speak out of turn. But now I don't see that. So, yeah, I would say those are things that we can get, that we can make either, we can request it, they're public records, or we could request it of those city agencies. In the last meeting, the mayor said that they would be open to providing that information, but I want to keep us on track just to make sure. Are you saying that you would want that data before we accept the charge? I think I lost.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't do it myself. I'm not saying that at all. I didn't know that the question on the table was whether or not we are accepting the charge. So that's a great point.
Okay.
Just wasn't aware that that's what we were doing right now.
Yeah, so I think at this point we're pretty settled on discussing what our work plan and our charge and our work plan.
Okay, I'll withdraw my question. It still would be interesting to have that information. But in listening to the folks tonight, you know, we don't want to, are we restructuring, are we reforming, or are we suggesting that the money allocated to the police department go in another direction? I think those are, you know, very, very different approaches. And I'm not sure the work plan addresses the reallocation of money and where that money should go, unless I'm missing something.
So I think I should point out at this point, we don't have a work plan yet. That's what we're still working on and deciding. And if we're really frank, we don't even necessarily have a consensus model at the moment. So like there's those sort of questions in addition to what lens we want to look at this through, if it's through abolition or is it through reforming and sort of that path. but Lois is next.
I had some, I think, I hope we can talk again about what to form committees, because somebody said it, David maybe, or everybody that spoke about committees said it, that this is sort of an unwieldy group to try to actually go through anything and request anything and think about anything and have a discussion. And I think that's what we're going to need to do about pretty much everything. And so, I mean, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about sort of categories of committees. And so I was thinking about a policing practices committee, and, you know, all sorts of things could go under that, like a use of force and stops and qualified immunity. All of those kinds of things could go under, like, under that category. I mean, it could be, I mean, we can expand it, whatever. But, and then an alternatives to policing category, and then a big budget category that would be, you know, some of the kinds of things that I guess Cynthia brought up about contracts, and not just the police contracts, but any external contracts of the police, you know, with any other entities like the federal government or whatever, I don't even know. But, you know, equipment, all of that, and all of those things that would come under requesting, you know, things having to do with money and requesting that. And then I think once we start having some of these things, we can, to me, I mean, the way I'm thinking about it for myself is then we can sort out this plan, or I can try to sort out this plan about, for me, how it is. I mean, my goal, I mean, I'll just say, most people I think probably know this about me, is, you know, a significant reallocation of money to the things that will create a safer community that isn't police. And so to move in that direction, whether it's in 1 year or 2 year or whatever. But I mean, I'm not, that's kind of where I'm at. But I mean, those are the sort of, to me, at least right now, the sort of big categories of committees, and there can be tons under each committee, and maybe we can decide on what those committees are, and then people on those committees can figure out like all the subcategories of whatever those committees are. But I mean, it's such a huge area that I don't see any other way to do it.
Elizabeth?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I'm looking at, I think part of the confusion might also be that when I'm looking at this list of issues to be studied, and there seems to be a kind of amalgam of both. There's a question of scope, you know, what is it that we're studying? You know, what are the different pieces that we're looking at? And some of these issues are not issues, they're actually are kind of suggested solutions. There's body cameras, and there's training and diversity. You know, those are presuming that we, if you're that we have us presuming a lot about, you know, what remains around the existing police department, right? If you're talking about diversity and body cameras, right? So, you know, there is an issue of both scope and what solutions are. There's some solutions or some proposed responses embedded in these issues. And then there's also, again, you know, I do think it's appropriate to talk about approach. You know, if you're looking at it from an abolitionist point of view, if you're looking at it from a reform point of view, some of these issues are going to be, you know, moot. Actually, they're not something that's actually going to be part of the conversation. So it's really, it is actually very, it's somewhat muddled to try to figure out, you know, what's the charge when we're talking about our charge. You know, I do think we do need to talk about what the scope of what we're looking at, and again, what is our agreed upon approach. And with that, I guess my contribution to this is thinking around, there's a lot of data that's already been collected. I know some of the public comments have mentioned that. There's a lot of data that's been collected now for this city. There's data that's been collected, nationally around policing. And I think it's, not wanting to, we have to move quickly in terms of getting relatively quick turnaround in terms of the report. I think it makes sense to, in terms of our scope, to not kind of double back on those efforts, but really kind of, be able to collect them. Everyone can take a look at them and read them and then start from there. But I really am eager to think about what is the charge based on, what our scope and approach is. And then some of these items are really not necessarily issues or even, I mean, they're almost kind of at the far end of what we aim to be in terms of our proposal. So maybe sorting some of those things out.
Yeah, no, those are all really good things, especially for thinking like backwards design and sort of what our goal is. So Josie?
Yeah, so kind of echoing back on the idea of what our scope is and what our lens is, we've all kind of we are in this wholly unique situation where we have formed this, we have been selected, we have been appointed for this position of police reviewing commission, and we are here to serve the people of Northampton. And just the very diversity and kind of mental capacity of this commission is revolutionary. I would really love to, I guess what I'm getting at is I think that we owe it to the people of Northampton to look for revolutionary perspectives. And by that, I would like to see this commission push toward the lens of prison abolition. Just straight up. We have hundreds of years of policing data that exists that suggests that police reform does not work. If anything, it expands the power of policing. And we already know that policing kind of disenfranchises and harms the most vulnerable people in our community. And so I think we should take this tremendous responsibility and really commit ourselves to a kind of revolutionary lens, which is prison abolition. Sorry, not prison abolition, policing abolition, but also hopefully prison abolition and the abolition of the carceral state of the United States. But we are also kind of the blueprint for other local municipalities who might be looking to do something similar. And so I think we have to be willing to take that scary first step and really push for something new and really have the city council and the mayor to commit that 10% to alternatives, to community-based alternatives, to kind of addressing the causes of criminality in our communities, which is often lack of housing, lack of accessibility to education, and all these excellent points that people who came here and took times out of their day to tell us, to let us know that these funds are needed in these other areas. The policing budget only continues to inflate, and that money could easily be reallocated to more social programs that could do some really huge impacts in this community. And that's kind of, yeah, that's my piece.
All right, David?
Yeah, to try to move this discussion along, I really liked Lois's suggestion of 3 committees with the possibility of those committees creating smaller subcommittees within them. And I'm wondering if, Lois, you could restate your ideas as to because I didn't get them, the 3 committees that I think you had proposed, and put it in a motion form so that we can kind of move on. And if people want to amend your motion, propose amendments to your motion to add other committees. But I think that's the best way to advance this discussion.
All right. So then Cynthia.
In terms of those, just 2 points. In terms of the subcommittees, I just want everyone to remember that every subcommittee is subject to open meeting law. So we just have to think about the implications of that. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but it's something we have to live by. And the other thing I just want to throw out there, boy, it would be really good for me to know where we all stand. And maybe we're all evolving. But I heard 3 words. Do we want to reform? Do we want to abolish? Or do we want to reimagine? And maybe some want to keep the status quo as well. But I think that's, as Elizabeth and Josie were saying, I think that's the lens. We need to know what our lens is. Because if we're all operating under a different lens, I'm not sure we're going to get this job done. And I'm not trying to call anyone out here, but I just think it would be good that we know what we as individuals are working toward, so that we know what our group is working toward.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure how to proceed in that. I don't know. I guess I would have to ask the question, are folks comfortable identifying where they stand in this meeting at this time? At this point, I mean, I know I am. I'm pretty comfortable with that, but I'll defer to how folks are thinking. So Josie, Elizabeth, and then Mandy.
Yeah, I'm wholly comfortable saying that I am for police abolition. I mean, I'm young, but I have felt the effects. I've seen the effects of policing. I've studied the effects of policing. I see how it is implemented in other places of the United States, what models have been used internationally, and it really does feel like we really have to take a lot of the teeth off of out of policing. Something new has to be done. We can't keep throwing ourselves against the wall thinking that it's going to change, that we're going to reform this wall. We need to tear it down.
All right. Elizabeth?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I like that. I mean, I do think it is something that we should be thinking about in terms of, identifying, where we kind of are, what our personal approach is, because we were chosen as individuals to be here and representing a certain perspective. I think also, it might, there's also another opportunity, but I'm also really holding this idea that, it's 15 people is not the community of Northampton. We can only bring a single individual perspective and try to also hear, the public and hear where some of that might be. And so I'm wondering if it even might be something along the lines of subcommittees or committees where we're actually exploring those different approaches, the reform, abolition, or reimagine, and exploring those different approaches as in regards to all the different issues and the scope that we're looking at for this effort. I'm wondering if that might be a way to really be able to drill down a little bit more on the data and on the information and the best practices on each of those 3 different approaches, so that we're able to really, I think legitimacy is a really important piece of whatever we come up with. And I would love for, our report to really have that level of scrutiny, that we've actually scrutinized other types of approaches. And so, I feel like if we're all, I mean, I know personally how I feel, but if we're all in one camp, it might bring up some questions of, did we truly scrutinize some of these other approaches that the community is interested in thinking about as well. So I'm just trying to hold, maybe it's coming together along those lines, or maybe it's an idea of having 3 different or 2 different, the abolish or reimagine, committees that we're exploring those different approaches in that way.
Okay, so in that way, we would have maybe the 2 committees, and then that would change the 3 committees based on based on police practices, alternatives, and budget for that angle. Okay, so that's something to think about if folks want to make motions to support that. But Namdi, you were next.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I would just sort of say that as I read the task that was laid before us, I think we sort of have to have at least one foot in the realm of reform, despite what we were asked by the majority of who spoke today from the community. Our charge, the way I read it, clearly states that we are supposed to, our work, the issues to be studied include a variety of matters that are, like specifically body-worn cameras, or things that we're asked specifically to study. And then we can add to that in all sorts of ways, including abolition and reimagine. But I don't know that we have the option to kind of just do away with looking at what it says the commission shall do. And I guess I feel committed to do what we were asked to do and then go beyond that. That's my 2 cents on that. I'm not sure that's negotiable. Maybe it is in your minds, but I don't think it is.
All right, there are a list of folks. I'm going to put myself at the end. So it's Lois, then Javier, and then Michael, and then myself.
Maybe instead of examples of alternatives to policing, there could be a committee that looks at the alternatives, looks at that could be the committee, that could be the abolition reform reimagining committee as part of that. That's one like amendment to my original idea. Or the other possibility is just in terms of what Namdi was saying, I mean, I think, like whether there should be body cameras or not, or buying them, or all that could be under the policing practices subcommittee. I mean, any of those specifics could be under that. But maybe to keep the 3 original ones that I put out there, and within that, have each committee ponder what these 3 what can happen within these 3 categories in each of those committees. If people are following what I'm saying, so that framework, abolition, reform, reimagining, goes for alternatives, goes for policing, goes for budget, goes for, so those 3 categories are the lens to look at each of these 3 subcommittees through, if you get what I'm saying. So that's kind of, that's my proposal. So that becomes those 3 categories become the lens for everything that we study. And then we can have, people can bring that lens to what it is we're thinking of, each of those categories.
Okay, so that's one option. So just the mandate of each subcommittee is to include those 3 perspectives as a potential. So Javier, sorry, I muted you. Sorry. There you go.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to what Lois was saying. I think it's a really good idea from the point of view that even people who are for reforming, learning what abolition is about, I think they would sort of comprehend more, and maybe not necessarily change position, but certainly understand from where the abolitionist movement from the police department comes from. One of the things that I just want to state is that one of the main things, and people complain about the idea of this commission started, was that we were going to write a report and that's going to be put in the shelf and that's it. So I would just invite everybody to think about that and to challenge everybody to that whatever report we make has to be incredibly concrete and applicable. Because I don't want to give the city, I don't want to give anybody who reads that report the excuse of not applying the recommendations.
Michael?
Well, thank you. You know, I just listening to everybody here, and I'm kind of brought back to, you know, to June when this came before the city council, and Alex and I, as councilors, were faced with, you know, a tremendous amount of public comment, much longer than what we witnessed tonight. But I think about how much I learned during that time and how much, you know, I didn't understand at the beginning and came to understand as the process went along. So I really felt, you know, as I was looking at what our charge is here and what those things are that our council president and the mayor put forward as the ideas of things that we should study. And I started to kind of put them into categories as well, not as sophisticated as Lois had. You know, Lois's 3 categories, I think, for possible subcommittees were really on point. But I basically was able to break them into 2 things. One is kind of what the police does now, plus body-worn cameras and civilian oversight review models, things that might affect the police specifically in the future. And then the other is the alternative category here, right? With transitioning mental health calls and so forth, study of resources, examination of alternatives. You know, one of the things that I think Namdi said earlier in our charge, and I have the website open here, you know, is, you know, this commission is to study these complex issues, recommend reforms, recommend, you know, to recommend ways, it's a lot more words here, but that we can transform how the city delivers policing while ensuring community safety equitably and justly for all. So part of me feels that taking those 3 words, as Elizabeth said, abolition, reform, reimagine, and as Lois mentioned, and kind of exploring every single one of these things and more with those 3 ideas, what's the best choice for Northampton? I think that's what we're tasked with here. And some of it may be, like we heard from people that spoke tonight and even from some of the commissioners here. And I'm so happy, I mentioned this last week, I'm so happy to learn from you and from the public here, but that some of these things, maybe we should take this out of the police's hands. This is something that they're doing that they don't need to do. But some things we may look at and say, this requires at this time, and this time we don't have a suitable alternative for Northampton, but maybe we can start that push, you know? So I think this is really it for me, is looking at every single bit of this through all 3 of those lenses and finding what's the best situation for Northampton. Thank you.
All right, so I just want to interject, because I don't think that this is necessarily a bad way to look at things. Just because others have, I will also identify, I'm pretty firmly in the abolition camp for policing. I think we can have much better crisis responses in other ways that don't involve an institution that was built to oppress. I think we can really work to make something, we could define something better. I think there are examples of it working in other contexts. And so really it's going to be figuring out how we do that in our context. The only thing that concerns me a little bit, if we have a committee or a subcommittee with multiple subcommittees in there, and all of that work has to examine how 3 different lenses approach different problems, looking for 3 sets of information, 3 sets of data, 3 sets of case studies, 3 sets of everything else, that does sort of triple the workload. And I'm not dismissing that as like, this is, you know, you might find research that sort of correlates and crosses, right? Those are not necessarily exclusive boundaries, especially if you think of things in terms of temporal processes. But I think it is important to sort of understand that if we're looking at something very complex, that we are tripling our work in a very short amount of time. So that might change what the scope or the ability of our group is to do in that sense. So I don't want to be discouraging. I just want to say, like, this is, this is essentially not a marathon. In this case, it is a sprint to find information and make sure that it's applicable. So the more concrete our goal is, the more information we can get and process and adapt. But that's all I'll say on that. So the next is Alex.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of share where I'm at, and then so I'm in a place of listening to hundreds of people, and many of them showed up in the June budget process, and there are many people who didn't because they couldn't or didn't feel safe or didn't know, and so I'm I'm in a place of listening to many voices. I love the idea of a community and a world where the police aren't needed, and I do want us to move forward on that. And I also recognize that there are very real public safety needs where the police are presently the only option, and we need to make sure that the police are doing the best they can and are accountable. I want to make sure that the movement we have toward alternatives is done in a very, very well, because there will be many people who are arguing that these alternatives don't make sense, and so we need to make sure that this is done well and not so quickly that there are too many examples where too many gaps in where we're moving toward, so that the opponents of alternatives will sort of push back against that. And then so that's kind of where I'm at. And then I really liked the subcommittees that Lois put. I would sort of clarify them in my mind. There's policing practices would be one. There's alternatives to police work. So the transit calls for different when calls come in for police work, who could serve those. And then there's studying how spending elsewhere reduces the need for policing, reduces crime. In our charge, that one's put as a study of resources for governmental and non-governmental investment in needs that, if met, reduce crime. So those are kind of three different ones, and I love the idea of us looking at abolition in there and reform and reimagine as best we can. Thanks.
All right, and then so Booker.
I like the idea of the subcommittees. Now, where am I? 2 or 3 years ago, I first learned about abolishing the police. It was a very uncomfortable set of meetings for me. I found the whole idea quite upsetting, unsettling, and difficult to imagine. I'm now really close to abolishing the police completely, because I've just learned a lot since that early. It sort of had to open up a door for me to hear it. But I've got to say, I work with a certain metaphor. It's not a metaphor, it's actually real. To me, this is like another terrible institution that used to exist, which were the large psychiatric hospitals. I was growing up in Berkeley at that time when the state hospital in Napa closed, which was similar to what happened here when the state hospital in Northampton closed. They were terrible institutions. They were oppressive. They were difficult. They did terrible things to many people. Then they abolished them and released all of those people without any services. And quite frankly, now what the police are doing is dealing with the residua of what that decision was. So I actually, overall, it was right to change the mental health system, but there was no support for what those group of people needed. And guess what? Now the police are doing a lot of that work. So I want to move towards something like that, but I don't want to set up a circumstance that we've poorly served people otherwise. Now, the other thing I'm reading at the moment is Adam Gopnik's book about what does it mean to be a liberal. And part of that is you have to embrace radical change at all times and recognize the fact that you're going to make a mistake and it's going to need to change again. That's what I think we're going to end up doing. I feel like this is what Larissa was saying to us a week ago. So I think that's where we are. I think we're all going to evolve on this. Now, there are still a lot of pave the way for abolition screens up in front of me. And I'm going to ask them to feel free to email me with examples that they've found internationally or nationally of things that have been done to decrease police presence that have worked. I've been doing a lot of reading and I haven't found those models yet. So I would like to have those people help me out with giving me information about that.
All right, Nick.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. I like Lois's suggestion because it's unwieldy to have a list of a dozen things, and I think grouping them into the categories current practices and I think that current practices, alternatives, but also looking at our community and what community resources exist is something I think we really need to know more about. And then I think also I'd like to see how we can fit the oversight process in there as well, and any civilian review processes that are in place. But I do want to say that I joined this committee to learn. I don't have a totally preformed idea about where I want things to end up, but I also feel like we need to know what practices exist that are already alternatives that may already be existing for our community, and also what I have a very shallow understanding of how our own Northampton police function, and I feel like I would like to learn more about that as well. That's all I want to say about that. I just want to echo what Booker said about the closing of the state hospital, because that was a big part of my career in seeing that closed down and seeing something that had to happen, but happened in a way that there weren't supports for the patients when the hospital closed. And it was a very, very difficult period and a very difficult transition. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Before we move on, I just want to recognize that it is 7:36. So we have 24 or, sorry, no, we have an hour because we're going to 8:30, right? Never mind. I'm sorry. I have lost track of all time and meeting. All right. So ignore that. We'll go to Lois. And I do want to point out, we still don't have a motion for a committee yet. So anybody would like to make that motion at any point in time? It seems like there's consensus there.
Okay. Well, I just have to say something in response to what Booker said. Also, Nick, I mean, all the work that I do is about jails and prisons. And jails, of course, have become the place of people that have been used to be locked up in mental hospitals and are now locked up in jails. And so, I mean, that is, that's the end result of closing down mental institutions, or whatever the politically correct, I don't know if there was a politically correct word for them, and having people come out into the streets with absolutely no supports. So, I mean, we can see that just going to any jail. And anyway, but in terms of, I mean, one reason that I feel like we need to have this category, which I mentioned about budgets, is that we need to see, what money is being spent on. I mean, I am a prison abolitionist, and because of that, I am a police abolitionist. But I am not, I'm 73 years old. I have been doing work like this my whole life. I'm not like an instant person. I'm a pragmatic person. And I believe that part of what we need to do, and which is why I think we need to look at these categories through these different lenses, but to look thoroughly at these categories, is not to say, I'm saying that we need to abolish the police, on December 31st, 2020, or whatever date we want to, whenever this commission is supposed to run out, but to actually have a plan for doing that. And in order to do that, it means taking money, and that's police money, and finding other money, and and supporting and figuring out what the supports are that we need to do to create a community where we don't have people like on the street, where there are services for people with, substance use issues, and not just say, yes, bang, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a process, and I'm hoping that we can come up with a roadmap, and the roadmap is more than 6 months, or more than a year, or more than 2 years or 3 years, to actually make this real. My commitment is to try to make it real. And for me, for it to be real, it has to look at all of these categories and really think about what we mean over time, and what the reallocation of money means. A lot of money, and how to find other money to do that. So that's my position. And I do make a motion to create these 3 categories as deep as we can make each category, as deep as we can make each category. That's what I want to see.
And it looks like Booker is seconding that. So at this point, I'm not exactly sure how to handle comments after a motion has been made. Do we go through the rest of the folks that have their hands up? Yes, all right. Okay. So at this point, we'll go to Javier. Did you get that pop up? There you go.
There you go. I just want to flag that, I mean, and I agree completely with what Lloyd has said, Booker has said. There is gonna, if we go through that route, which sounds really good, there is gonna be the need to have a repository of documents in a place where we can go for information. That's, if not, it's gonna be crazy. Including if people, so I know that other commissioners receive articles sent for members of the community. I think would be good also to be able to send those articles to a repository where everybody can take a look to them.
Yeah, I'll put myself at the end to respond to that. Okay, so Javier, or sorry, not Javier, Elizabeth. Sorry.
Hi. Yeah, I agree with the motion to do the police practice, alternatives in policing work, and a study on the budget. I just wanted to amend, see if we could, I mean, I know we have to vote on that motion to amend it, but I would actually like us to think about not just police practice, but police practice and service. We keep talking about services and then the alternative to those services. And I want those to actually be very rooted in the data about what Northampton needs and the services that Northampton needs. Because not in general, not in, you know, what Boston needs or whatever, but what specifically are the services that Northampton police are providing? And are those and what are those alternatives? We talk a lot, we've been talking a lot here. We've also heard public comments around mental health services. But when you actually look at the call data from the city of Northampton, the police logs, the majority of the services that are provided are property checks, unsolicited property checks. So these are, you know, there's no reason to check on it. They're just checking on it and they're logging that in. So the majority of the services are actually property-based services. Is that appropriate? Do we want to find an alternative to property-based checks? I don't know that we do. You know, I don't know that we need public dollars being spent on private property checks. I mean, someone can hire a security guard if that's what they like to do. But again, that would be private money to go to their private property. So again, I think that there's some assumptions. There's and in terms of thinking about what the services are that we actually do need to examine. So I wanted to just add, you know, if I could offer, you know, after our vote, but I would just actually offer this police practice and services so that we are examining, because when I looked at the data for the police logs, what I saw was that the majority were property checks, unsolicited property checks. There were some mental health checks, and then there were some very, very few calls were actually in regard to imminent violence. If there was an imminent violence, you needed the police force for the safety of the public. You needed their lethal force there in order to be able to provide protection to the public, which is what I think a lot of people assume when we say abolish police. They're like, oh my gosh, you know, but who's going to come with lethal force should I need lethal force to protect the public, right? And but in Northampton, that is a rare occurrence of actually what the services that they provide. So there's that imminent violence kind of threat to the public. There's traffic and traffic stops. Again, is that something you need someone with lethal force to be able to provide? You know, on the public, you know, our public services, our public funds, do we need lethal force to guide traffic, you know, or to keep people from speeding or that sort of thing? Those type of basic law. I mean, we have people who are giving out parking tickets and they're not using lethal force. There's certain law enforcement pieces, a lot of them actually, the majority of them, that don't require lethal force. So are there alternatives to that? And when I say, so I think that that's why I'm, you know, thinking about the scope, you know, what are the services that are appropriate for how Northampton needs lethal force on the streets? You know, if we're actually not moving towards complete abolition, because I know that that is a huge step for folks. And coming from a community of color where, you know, there's not, you know, you often feel like, well, no one's here to help us. You know, and if we actually do need protection from imminent violence, there's no one to call. And even when there are police with lethal force, they could help you. They don't, you know, so there's this idea of like, we do need some kind of alternative or some sort of solution to keeping the public safe and everyone in the public safe, not just propertied folks and or, you know, people of a certain race or class. So there is that, I think, is the core of the concern when people are thinking about police. That's the core of the concern people are thinking about is how do I stay safe? How do my neighbors stay safe? So there's that service, but I think, and then we've been talking about mental health, but I guess it's important to remember that the majority of the services maybe are not appropriate at all for a public dollar, for the public dollar. So it's not even trying to find someplace in the budget for an alternative. It's just about saying there's no need for any public funds to be spent on this particular thing. So that's why I would add to amendment to say that, you know, police practice and services, and that piece, that charge, be about really looking at the data about what Northampton needs in terms of services of any public goods at all. and looking at, and there's plenty of data to examine that from.
Great. So next would be Larissa, and then Alex, and then we'll move on to a vote.
Okay, I was trying to unmute it. Couldn't click it in. I just wanted to say something. I don't know what abolition looks like. So that's me. And like Booker, I would love for people to send me emails about what that looks like. But what I do hear in that is that it's radical change. And that's part of the history of Northampton and Florence is radical change and abolitionists. I think when you look at abolition, you have to go through these lenses. You're going to go through some reform to get to abolition. You have to go through reimagining to get to abolition. So I do agree with, I can't remember who brought it up before, looking at these three models, these three sections through reform, abolition, and reimagine, because I think you're going to get there. If you get so radical out, you're going to go through all these other steps. You're going to have to do the research on the budget. If you abolish the police, where does the budget go? What happens to that, right? So all of these things, if you look at that as that model, you have to go through this path. So I want to learn more about that, but that's how I think I'm going to be looking at these pieces. That's it.
All right, and then Alex.
I wanted to ask for clarification around the motion. So if Lois, if you could specifically say the three committees and their names and any description, then we have that motion on the floor, and then we can choose to amend it.
There you go.
Okay. If one, so policing practices and services, I agree with Elizabeth. So that would be, all of these different things under it. I mean, use of force, training, stops, de-escalation, all qualified, all of that, to me comes under the things that are in the original charge, like, cameras or not cameras, that kind of thing. All of those things to me fit under that category. And then the other one is alternatives to policing. And examples of what's happening around the country, because there are examples already happening not in quote cities the size of Northampton, in actual cities, like cities that have populations, not 30,000 people. So it's different. Our experience is different. So, but anyway, but also then trying to figure out this other thing, what the alternatives would be for Northampton, not for Minneapolis. And then the third one is everything having to do with money and budgets. The police department budget, salaries, all of that, overtime, police details, the cost of those, all contracts, not just union contracts, but any kind of other contracts. Like, I don't even know whether these exist, but contracts with other police departments, federal contracts, any kind of contracts for equipment. All of those kinds of things. And then maybe this is sort of the overlap with policing practices, but I had the percentage of time responding to different kinds of calls or different kinds of requests. And that's what Elizabeth was talking about in what she was saying. I saw one thing where how much time was spent like putting car seats and like baby car seats in people's cars, which to me is not a policing function. I mean, it's nice, but it's not a policing function. And anyway, so all of the things that, so that maybe is a service thing, but everything else that has to do with budgets and money, those are the three big categories. And I think, you know, they can be added to, as my guess is once the committee forms, there's going to be pieces that people want to see that aren't in this, you know, like rough outline that I'm giving you now. That's my proposal, a motion.
Okay. And Alex?
Great, thank you for that clarification. I would move to amend to add the issue of the alternatives that if funded would reduce the need for policing. And it seems like that would fit in with alternatives to policing. So I would move to amend the name, or the alternatives to policing subcommittee to say, and alternatives to reduce the need for policing.
Okay.
That would need a second.
I don't see anyone with their hand raised, so I will second. Oh, Nandy seconding. So there we go. So are we prepared to take a vote at this point? Oh, Lois, sorry, let me unmute you here.
I do want to just add back that this idea of having this prism, this threefold prism in our thinking, and I don't want that to get lost. I mean, we've all said it, but you know, the abolition, reform, reimagining. And I think that's the framework, that's the umbrella for each, what I'm suggesting, a way of thinking for each of these committees. Not that we have to come out with three separate proposals, like this is the reform one, this is the, you know, reimagining one, this is the abolition one, but to think to that, use that as our way, our context, our prism for thinking. Not that we'll need, you know, 30 different proposals.
Back to Alex.
So the amendment we have to vote on that specific amendment that I just made, and then we vote on the whole charge. So yeah, we would want to ask if there is any further discussion on that amendment that I made, and then if there isn't, we would take a vote.
The only thing, I guess I'll raise my own hand. The only thing that I also I want to point out, and I'm not sure if there's language, I don't have anything in my notes that limits it, but just that all of these things that the subcommittee will explore if we're dividing up that charge, that again, as we've said a whole bunch of times, we're not limited to those things either. So as committees make discovery, or subcommittees make discoveries, they could expand the scope of what they were looking at. And I don't know if we need to make it explicit or if it's implicitly understood in the wording of the charge from the city as well. So I'll just leave that there. And then, so Carmen, and then Cynthia, and then Namdi.
I just want to clarify, I know there's been a little bit of two discussions going on, but are we using the language of abolish, reform, and or reimagining? Or are we sticking to one of the terms? I'm just a little bit confused in that part.
So as it stands, the subcommittees would look at all of them as part of their charges, looking through each of those and how they relate to one another. Unless anyone has another understanding, but that's what I have written down so far. Cynthia?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just clarify that these subcommittees, I don't think are addressing what I've heard about redirecting funding. And because we're not there yet, that's my assumption, and I just want to make sure it's an accurate assumption. We use this term, we'll redirect the money, and it's not that easy until we know where we're redirecting it to. So I think I'm viewing the subcommittees as gathering information, research, and then maybe if we went through reimagining to abolition or to or reform or whatever, the idea of where that money is going to get reallocated to is just a separate discussion.
Mandy, and then I guess I'll raise my hand again.
Okay, sure. I just want to, at the risk of reiterating, I just want to make sure that when we vote on the motion, that the language in the motion refers specifically to reform, reimagine, abolish, whenever we sort of say what we're voting on. So I think the way we said it, you said it in your notes, Dan, and we've been discussing it, but I'm thinking now about the community that might be seeing our work in some sort of printed form. We had an hour-long sort of pitch from people telling us abolish, and I would want to make sure that they sort of had their voices heard in a sense by making sure we put it in writing that we were going to think about abolish as well as these other things in each of these steps. I worry that language might just be in our heads, but not in print, or not formally part of the charge or what we vote on. I just want to make sure, it sounds like we're saying that, but I just want to confirm that that's what we're saying and we sort of say it out loud and that the community gets it, even though I imagine some will object that we're also considering reform. They've told us not to do that, but they definitely would like us to consider abolish. And so I'd like us to say we're considering that. That's my 2 cents.
Sorry, I was muted for myself. I guess for myself, I think that's fine. I think it's really good to have everything explicit as possible. In that sense, I do sort of, and this I guess gets back to the purpose of the subcommittees. I see the subcommittees as gathering information, but also presenting that back to the commission, like during general meetings, or sharing it as public documents. But those findings might also include recommendations. I don't see many scenarios where they wouldn't at least have some recommendations. So I think you would have, back to Cynthia's question, that you would have from the group that's looking at spending, they would have recommendations on where other people have spent money and where it's reduced crime, where other people have spent money and it's improved city life and infrastructure, where people have meant where money could go, and locally to our context, what institutions or what groups, and that's actually part of the charge, right, is what investments can the city make to improve services. And so I would say that the subcommittees will likely have recommendations on how to spend reallocated funds, because we could talk about the future reallocation of funds, but there is already, almost $1 million, say, $750,000 that hasn't been allocated for anything yet. It was cut with the intention to do that. So we could have, I think very reasonably, we could have recommendations on where that money should go soon, or sooner than later. So I guess the current amendment, again, as it stands, is to, after discussion, that we would have the 3 subcommittees related to policing practices and services, spending, and alternatives to police. Each of those would take on the corresponding tasks that are in the charge as written by the city, but would also include the option to expand. All of them will look at these specific issues in contexts of reform, abolition and reimagining, towards the goal of producing an actionable report with concrete recommendations. Does that make sense? Is that what everyone's on board with? So that we've got a summary of what we're voting for?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, Josie?
I'm good, actually. It's fine.
Okay. So we're looking at what we're voting to amend the initial motion. Oh, sorry, Alex. All right. Just
yeah, could you read those? So number 1, police practices and services. Number 2, alternatives to policing, and my proposal was to specifically say, including alternatives that reduce the need for policing. And then 3, budgets and spending. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, I had to reduce the need for investments for reducing the need for policing as one of the tasks for that subcommittee, just because that is one of the items itself, whereas none of the others are specifically items. I don't know if that makes sense. Like a study of governmental and non-governmental investment in needs that, if met, reduce crime. Like that's one of the items that the city listed. And since none of the other subcommittees have a specific item, I thought that we were keeping it separate. But did you want to add that to the entire name rather than just to the list of things that it's going to do? Alex? I think we might have lost Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll wait for him to come back. Lois?
I just wanted to say about the budget piece, not just spending, but I mean, maybe it's implied, but I also want to see as part of that contract, agreements and contracts.
Yeah. Okay, so I think Alex is back in. So we'll changing spending to spending and contracts. Alex, are you back in fully? There's a second Alex here. All right.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So 2 things. I just wanted to clarify for your amendment. So did you want the name of the subcommittee that's alternatives to policing to also include the item that is a study of resources for governmental and non-governmental investment in needs that, if met, reduce crime? Like, did you want to add that to the name of the subcommittee, or?
That's not necessary as long as it's in the charge of that subcommittee.
Okay. And then Lois did make another amendment, which would be changing the subcommittee to the spending and contracts subcommittee instead of just the spending subcommittee. All right, so I think, are we all on the same page now? Okay, so step 1, oh, no, all right. Sorry, we have a hand up. Michael?
Yeah, on that on the third subcommittee, I want to make sure I understand the name correctly. Is it budgeting, spending, and contracts? Is it just spending and contracts? I just want to make sure that I think we need to be really clear, and I'm not clear yet.
Okay. Lois, do you have a response to that?
All I meant was, I don't necessarily think that it has to be part. I'm talking about the overall category is budgets and money. But I just don't want to lose thing of where else police money comes from and where, so contracts and agreements. So it doesn't have to be part of the overall name of the committee, but I just, that's something that I'm curious about. That's something that I want to find out. I think, so that's my point here, just not to lose it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things here is it's more important that we know what the goal is of these different things rather than like the specific name. Like the name that's not necessarily the end all be all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, we are going to put this on the website for people to read. So just so it's clear for everyone, the name is a little bit important, but it's, I'm grateful for the clarification.
And Nick?
Lois, I'm just to clarify, you're basically saying that the budget committee wants to know where do the financial resources come from and where are they allocated? Is that correct? Thanks.
Lois, you should be able to unmute.
Yes.
All right then. Okay, so the first that we need to do is the motion to accept all of the amendments that have been made to the original motion, and then to accept the motion. So accepting the amendments that have made, Annie will do the roll call.
Okay, so Lois?
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay. Elizabeth?
So the counselors can't unmute themselves. They have to get them. So it's going to take me 1 second to find folks.
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Dana is absent. Namdi?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
And Larissa?
Yes.
Right, so that passes. Great. So we have all of the amendments to the motion. Now we need to vote on the motion itself to accept this as our charge and our essentially our work plan here with the formation of these subcommittees. So Annie, can you take roll call again?
Yep. Lois?
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
David, you are unmuted. Alex,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Javier,
Yes.
Dana absent, Namdi,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
and Larissa.
Yes.
All right, so that passes. So we have our formation of these 3 subcommittees, which is the agenda item that our last official agenda item. Before we go, before we adjourn, is there any new business that folks would like to add? Oh, sorry, Alex.
Okay, Nick, what, who's going to serve on them?
So that is a great question. I think at this point, I'm going to leave that up to someone else to sort of initiate how they want to go. But we do have David and Carmen. So David first.
I would move that prior to our next meeting, everyone submit to the chairs their committee of choice. And hopefully it all comes out somewhere near even. I mean, if everybody wants to be on the same committee, we'll have to revisit. But I think it gives us an opportunity to start somewhere.
Second.
All right. So we have three more folks, and then so we have that motion up for discussion as well. So Carmen.
So David actually beat me to it, and then Michael, thank you for seconding that.
All right. Josie.
Yeah, my only recommendation is that we submit our preferences in like a ranked choice. So which one you'd want first, second, third. But that's it.
Okay. So now we have ranked choice for committees, and then Lois.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Okay. So we have all of these. So we have a motion and we have an amendment. So I guess we will go through the process of voting on the amendments to that proposal. Alex, did you?
Just to speed up the process, if David accepts those, I think, as a friendly amendment, or perhaps just withdraws and resubmits, then we don't have to vote twice.
Awesome. All right. So we'll accept that as a friendly amendment then. All right, and then Annie, can you go through the list again?
Are those hands? Sorry, are those hands?
I think they were just left over. I didn't lower them yet.
Okay.
Oh, Annie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Lois?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Javier,
Yes.
Dana absent, Namdi,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
and Larissa.
Yes.
All right. So the motion passes. So we'll get that information out. And we'll collect the responses going to both Dana and myself with a rank choice of which committee you would like to serve on. Alex?
If I just wanted to speak to the repository idea, if this is an okay time to do that, or is there?
Yeah.
So I believe if we could send anything we want to be discussed at the next meeting to Annie, and Annie could put those documents in a repository that we could access, but we could not comment on any of it because that would be an open meeting law violation. So it should be a repository that Annie just gives us view access to. That's my understanding of how we could do that. Does that sound correct, Annie?
Yeah, that'll work. I don't think, I mean, I know you guys are hiring somebody, so, well, not you, your commission in particular, but whoever is staffing the next meeting can put something in a repository for everyone to view. But no, you wouldn't be able to comment on it or anything like that. And nothing really should be coming from the chair. Any emails that are sent to the chair for distribution to the group should come through the staff person.
And as a follow-up, Alex, I did already, Dana and I met with the mayor and Gina Louise Chiara as talking about like where we could create, how we could create repositories for sharing files, links and other information in an appropriate way. So that's working on like a city-owned Google Drive that would be open to the public and to ourselves so that we could create repositories of information as well, which is something that I think Javier and a couple other people brought up as well in terms of how do we share information while adhering to open meeting law. So as soon as we have more on that, I would, it'll be an agenda item that I can bring up so that we all know how to access it and use it properly. Nick and then Booker.
Do we send our committee choices to Annie or to you, Dan?
Honestly, at this point, I'm not 100% sure. My personal preference would be to create a form that people fill out because then you have the data in an Excel sheet and it's nice and easy and it's all uniform. But I would also need to check and make sure how that process would be handled because I'm not 100% sure.
So the recommendations can be sent to the chair. And then it's up to, or the co-chairs, it's up to them to put in the commissioners into each subcommittee.
Okay, then to us. So I will get a form set up that can be distributed to everybody later this evening for that. So next would be Booker.
Have we When is our next meeting? Is it next week or 2 weeks from now?
So at the previous meeting, we had said 2 weeks from now, but we can still amend that to meet sooner. I think the concern was that eventually, if we followed the original pattern, we would meet on election evening, which I think many of us are very interested in for various reasons. So yeah, we could still do the 2 week interval. I know like having sooner meetings was still going to be an issue for some folks. Does anybody, and I know we have Javier next, but if anyone wants to amend that, you could speak now. Javier?
If Carmen is going to comment on that, I would prefer Carmen going first.
Okay. Carmen?
Thank you, Javier. I would like to amend for us to meet next week so we can talk about finalize who's going to be, what commissioners are going to be on what committee, and start formulating a plan.
Okay. So, Elizabeth?
I think Javier was next.
Or sorry, are there any other? So Javier exceeded his time to talk about meeting next. Is that something that you wanted to do as well?
No, thank you for that. My request is that if we meet next week, that I'm wondering about the information we can get maybe as part of that public repository around the Northampton policing data. If that's something that we can review as we talk about, what the next steps are on the committees but if that's something we do, because it takes some time to get some of that information. So I'm wondering if that something that we can request now, I guess what's the process to do that? And because I know there's already some data sets that we could ask for that it just takes some time, and I'd want them for everyone to have the ability to read them and be able to sit with them a little bit before our next call.
Okay. So that process is going to depend on what we actually want in terms of information. Information requests have to be pretty specific if they're going to get processed. Otherwise, they in the past they've been met with either large costs associated with organizing and gathering that information or outright denials. So I think we want to be really clear and specific about what information we need or want, and then proceed from there. So I wouldn't, I don't think anything would be ready for next week beyond what's like publicly available, like the logs and things like that. But before we get too lost in the weeds of other things, so we can add that as an agenda item for next week. If we meet next week, which we still have not necessarily voted on, Lois, did you have a question or statement about the about meeting next week?
Yes. I think we should meet next week. I mean, we can go maybe to a 2-week schedule after that, but to me, we're still like in the organizing phase, and so I think meeting at least one more time, next week till the committees are formed. Hopefully after that, the committees will be formed, and then that following week, maybe that's when committees would meet. So I think that next week. And I just wanted to make sure that those original points that I asked about the translation, the Google translation, and somebody else mentioned ASL, and also just not to lose it if at some point we might want to have just as a budget line item in independent counsel.
All right, so we can add those to the next agenda item, or sorry, the agenda item for the next meeting. Nick, and then Namdi. Nick, you're still muted.
Sorry. If we're going to meet more frequently, that just trying to stick to the time frame would be helpful. Just want to put that out there.
All right, so when somebody makes a motion about meeting next week, they could specify the time for that. Namdi?
Yeah, thanks. Also, just wanted to correct my name. I pronounced my name Namdi, so it's just a slight difference in the A. No, it's okay, it's fine. And then second, I do think it's might be kind of an urgent priority for us to move towards soliciting data, sort of information of the kind that Elizabeth raised and Cynthia raised earlier. And just to that end, I think what I'd like to do is start to generate maybe some questions, some of these specific questions that Dan, you suggested would be good if we had, and maybe invite the other commissioners to start to brainstorm such things, like look at the list of items that we're charged to deal with and start to imagine what questions you'd like to have answered, so that by the time we reconvene, some of that pre-thinking was done. Maybe we could submit it to the chairs, or just like sort of have that in motion to some degree. We can start to see each other's ideas and maybe vote on a prioritized list of what we want to know, because I think it's important we have a common set of facts that we can kind of all agree about, and we can discuss, and sort of getting that in motion soon seems like a priority to me. So I just want to invite people to start thinking about that. And if any leaders want to suggest how we convey that, I'm open to any feedback people have about it.
Javier, I know we skipped around a little bit. I don't know if you want to offer comment, or if you were thinking anything about meeting next week, or if you still wanted to cede your time. Just want to check in.
No, I just want to. I was going to say something similar to that Lois said about the interpretation, translation, but I think that the issue, the starting point for that is figure it out. Do we have a budget? Do we have anything? So if we can try to figure whatever you, Dan, or Dana can sort of ask if we actually count with that, because if we don't have it, there is no conversation. I mean, there is a lot of complaint, but no conversation. So I think that would be good to have some clarity for next meeting.
All right, so that can be an agenda item as well that we can discuss. And then Alex.
So is there a motion on the floor to meet? No, okay, so I make a motion that we meet next Tuesday, October 6th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. with public comment.
Okay, so a meeting from 6 to 8:30. Okay.
Booker seconded that.
Just a clarifying question for this motion: is public comment first, or?
Yes.
Okay. And Booker seconded that. Annie, can we do a roll call?
You would want to ask for discussion, if there's any discussion.
Oh, sorry. Is there any discussion beyond what we've already? Josie?
Yeah, it's more of just a clarifying question of how we are splitting the time. Is it 1 hour of public comment? Because I remember last week, or last time we met, we talked about how 30 minutes is kind of like a weird, small amount of time for public comment. That's it. Just a clarifying on the way that the time is split. I would suggest 1 hour and then an hour, and then the rest of it goes to, kind of like what we did today.
Yeah, I agree with that in the motion.
Okay, so 6:30 to 8:30 with a full hour of public comment. Nick?
It was the same thing that Josie said.
Okay, and Lois?
I had the same thing that Josie said, so pass.
Okay, so we have 6 to 8:30, 1 hour public comment at the beginning on Tuesday, October 6th. That is the motion that's up. Any other discussion? All right, then let's do a roll call.
Lois,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Javier,
Yes.
Dana's absent. Namdi, did I get it?
Yes, you did. Well done. And yes, you have my vote.
Great. Michael,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
and Larissa.
Yes.
All right, so we have a pass. So we will be meeting from 6 to 8:30 on Tuesday, October 6th, with an hour of public comment at the beginning. And for agenda items, we have police data requests, the accessibility, both digital and language of our meetings, including translations, transcriptions, and captions. And then we have a discussion of what is the budget for this commission as well. Does anyone have anything else to add to that list for agenda items at this time? Michael?
Yeah, and you and Dana will be naming the members of the subcommittees.
Yes, sorry, that is a major one. All right, and Lois? Nope, okay. All right, so at this point, Alex?
I would just move to adjourn if that's what you're going to say.
That could.
That's exactly where I was going. I'm going to second that as well. Can we do another call?
Lois,
Can't unmute myself. I want to thank Dan for doing a great job. Thank you very much. And yes, I move to adjourn. But
great. And who seconded?
I did.
I did is.
That's Michael.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Namdi?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
And Larissa?
Yes.
All right, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Annie.